Hello guys, welcome to another virtual geography lesson, and today we're going to talk about another two types of landscapes that can be found to the south and to the north of the ones that we have been talking about previously, which is the tropical rainforest climate and temperate mixed and coniferous forest of temperate climate zone. And guys, for the beginning, I would like you to go to your textbook and open it on page 120, because here you will find a map that is very useful, and I want to talk about this a little bit more. And guys, once you open it on page 120, on the bottom of the page, you will see a map which will show the spatial extent of savannas, and they are marked in green. And as you can see on this map, basically to the north, to the south and north from tropical rainforests, there are savannas, and they occupy huge areas in Africa. As you can see, the biggest ones are in Africa, South America, which basically are spread almost evenly throughout the continent, and also Australia, but you can see some dots of savannas also in Asia and north to India and in India themselves. And guys, savannas basically belong to tropical climate zone, which is basically the warmest climate zone on Earth. Temperature is quite high throughout the year, and as you can see in that climatogram, you have it also in your book, but I have also downloaded it here. Niamey, which is in Niger in Africa, is characterized by that flow of temperature which varies from above 20 degrees Celsius, around 23, 24, up to even 35. So the temperature varies from 24 degrees Celsius to even 35 degrees Celsius, which means that the annual amplitude of temperature is how much? 35 degrees Celsius minus 24 degrees Celsius equals, from what I know about maths, 11 degrees Celsius, which is not that high actually. Anyway, what is interesting about this area is the fact that there are no four seasons, just like we are used to have them here in Poland, in Europe, but there are only two seasons. And due to the fact that temperature is more or less high throughout the year and it's more or less stable, the factor that will determine the presence of those seasons is the precipitation. As you can see, from May to September, the precipitation is really high, up to more than 100, up to 170 millimeters. And we can say that those seasons are not warm or cold, but in savannas we have dry season, which are the months with no or really small precipitation, and wet season, with the months that the precipitation is quite high. The fact that we have two seasons will mean that all the plants and all the animals have to adapt to those circumstances. The annual precipitation sum actually varies from 200 millimeters per year around deserts. So when you take a look at this map on page 120, you can see that the north line of savannas in Africa is neighboring with Sahara Desert. In those places, the annual sum of precipitation will be around 200 millimeters, and at the south border of savannas, neighboring with the rainforests, the annual precipitation will be up to 1000 millimeters. So precipitation from 200 millimeters to 8000 millimeters per year. Savannas basically are the habitat of grasses and very few trees. Very few trees because basically trees aren't able to cope with the very distinct conditions and periodical lacks of water. And let's go to page 122. On that page, you will see a graph showing the typical inhabitants of savanna. Uh, it's mostly grasses and tiny shrubs, but mostly grasses, so it looks like a really hot meadow. Very few trees, such as baobabs, which is on the left, and acacias, which is shown on the right, they have adapted to coping with those circumstances. Baobabs store lots of water in their huge trunks. And acacias, they have formed thorns, which are basically needles to protect themselves from being eaten. Um, this allows them to survive in those conditions. For the dry season of the year, the grasses will dry out and hibernate. And the same case is with baobabs, which will lose all their leaves for the dry season in order to protect themselves from evaporation. And the same case is with acacias. Vast areas covered in grasses favor the presence of huge herbivorous mammals, such as antelopes, which is in the middle of the graphics, zebras, elephants, or giraffes. And if we have huge mammals that are herbivorous, then we will of course have huge mammals that are predators. And the examples of predators are lions or leopards, which you can also see on page 122, uh, and also scavengers, which feed on dead animals or feed on the animals that haven't been totally eaten, and they are jackals, which is in the bottom of the page, and also birds such as vultures, sempe. And guys, king of the jungle. King of the jungle is typically, when you think of a king of the jungle, you think of a lion, which is a total nonsense because jungle is a tropical forest found in Asia, and a jungle is a home to tigers, not to lions. Lions have always lived in savannas. And guys, speaking of things that live in savannas, we can also focus on people. And people living in savannas focus on agriculture. In the areas with, of course, they can have that agriculture as long as they have precipitation. So the areas neighboring with tropical rainforests. People that are live in the areas closer to the deserts, where the precipitation is lower, then people usually keep cattle, goats, and sheep. And people that are inhabitants of savannas. You have an example of on page 121 are Maasai people. They live in Kenya or Tanzania. Some of them have their small villages with their houses built of whatever nature brought to them, which is mud and twigs and stuff like this. But some of them are nomads. which means that they don't create any villages. They wander from place to place, so they will have their temporary home, and after they have exploited all the resources from their nearest surroundings, they will move to another place. Some of them are still doing this. Okay, so this is in a nutshell about savannas. Now let's move on to the second kind of landscape we are going to discuss today, and those are steppes. And guys, please open your books on page 123, where you will find a map on the bottom of the page, and as well you will find a climatogram for Karaganda, which is a city located in Kazakhstan. And guys, let's analyze the location of steppes in on the globe. So the biggest areas of steppes can be found in Asia, in the interior of Asia mostly. Also, there are some spots of steppes in North America and in South America. In Africa, only a tiny percentage of area is covered in steppes. Steppes change their names depending on where they are located. So, the name steppes is used in relation to areas located in Asia. If it comes to uh, North America, then we will use the word prayer, praria. The same thing in South America will be called pampas, pampe. And if it comes to the climate of this of those steppes, then they belong to temperate climate zone, which means that this is much more changing throughout the year. So let's focus on the temperature for now. And as you can see, the warmest month, July, is up to 20 degrees Celsius, whereas the coldest month, which is January, is minus 15 degrees Celsius. So the amplitude of the temperature is 20 degrees Celsius minus 15 degrees Celsius, which equals to 20 degrees Celsius plus 15 degrees Celsius, which equals 35 degrees Celsius. This is the amplitude. So in steppes, we have the amplitude that is around 35 degrees. This means that throughout the year, the temperature changes usually in the range of 35 degrees. We list in savannas, it's only 11 degrees. This means that basically the climate is really continental. It's really continental because as you see the location of steppes on a map, you will see that they are in the interior of continents, so far away from oceans. And oceans and basically bodies of water have that characteristic that it makes the temperature more even throughout the year. If it comes to the precipitation, it's quite moderate throughout the year. And basically it varies from 300 to 500 millimeters per year. If it comes to seasons, there are 4 seasons. And the seasons are very extreme. So the winters are really freezing and the summers can be even burning. I know that 20 degrees Celsius is not that high, but remember that this is the average temperature, and average will always be closer to the middle of the range. In reality, in the middle of the summer, temperatures on a steppe can extend 40 degrees Celsius, and in winter they can fall way below minus 15 degrees. Uh, Guys, steppes are vast areas with grass and other small plants such as shrubs. And please go to page 125. And here you have a similar diagram presenting the types of plants and animals that are found in steppes. Trees won't grow here because of insufficient precipitation. That means that there is not enough water for them to grow. Mostly grasses and tiny shrubs. Plants blossom in the spring and in the beginning of summer. Because in the middle of summer it's too hot for them and too dry for them. Because once again, let's take a look, 40 millimeters in the most humid month. This is absolutely dry. Uh, in the middle of summer, they dry out, and the same thing also happens midwinter because in winter it's too cold for them to grow. In the past, steppes were home to big herbivorous mammals, such as bisons, and you have a picture of a bison on page 124 to the right of the text. But people just made them almost go extinct, so the population of them just shrinked dramatically. Now the characteristic inhabitants are small mammals that live in the holes in the ground because basically steppes are just vast plains. There is nowhere to hide, there are no trees, there are no layers of forests to hide, so they have to dig a hole into the ground, and this creates their shelter. Characteristic inhabitants are gophers, susły, and hamsters, chomiki, because they originate from those areas. Bigger mammals that can be found here are omnivorous or predatory ones, such as wolves, coyotes, and foxes, which they hunt for smaller mammals and basically can feed on berries and whatever they find in the steppe. And people living in steppes are Mongols and Kazakhs. Some of them still cultivate the traditional way of living. They keep horses, sheep, and camels called dromedaries. Uh, they need those animals to get milk, especially the sheep and dromedaries, but also they need horses to pack their things up and move somewhere else because some of them they are still nomads, which means that they will just wander through the steppe from place to place. They live in characteristic tents, yurts, and you have a picture of them on page 124, and they are easy to be dismantled, so they can just dismantle them, pack them on their horses, and this is it, and they can go further along with their cattle. So guys, what's the most important? Amplitude of the temperature in savannas is quite low, and there are two seasons, and also amplitude in steppes is quite high. There are four seasons, and basically there are three names for them depending on the location. And please remember that steppes belong to continental and moderate climate, whilst savannas they belong to tropical climate. Guys, this is it for today. Thanks for watching, and please stay safe at home.